Supply Chain Talk, the live webinar with no presentations, no PowerPoint, just talk.
Hello, welcome to this week's Supply Chain Talk with me, Chris Middleton. Today's conversation is going to be about creating a stronger and more transparent supply chain. If you want to find out more about me, you can find out about me on the Supply Chain Talk website or at chrismiddleton.company, but it's not compulsory. First up in our expert panel today, we have Louis Goldman, who's Supply Chain and Operations Director at Cloud9 Hair, subject very close to my heart. Cloud9 is electrical hair care omni-channel retailer and also produces electrical beauty products. Louis is responsible for the end-to-end global supply chain, as well as customer experience, he says, and product compliance. Prior to joining Cloud9 in 2021, he managed complex operations for a number of fast-paced retailers. So welcome, Louis. Next up is Nijoy Robinson, who's supply chain manager for strategy analytics, and product at consulting and professional services giant Deloitte. Nijoy has over 10 years experience of driving strategic decision support using analytical insights and developing AI-based solutions, very much in the news at the moment, of course, to improve supply chain management. Welcome. Next up is Camille Evrim, who's Director of Supply Chain and OPEX, in this case, Operational Excellence, not Expenditure, in the Process Analytics Division at Amitech. For those of you who don't know, it's a US multinational that specializes in analytical test and measurement equipment for industries such as aerospace, big energy companies, and so on. Welcome, Camille. And last but not least, I should say, by the way, that Camille has 17 years of experience in supply chain and spent 16 years in the automotive sector, various large tier one suppliers and Fiat Chrysler. And last but certainly not least, we've got Professor Dr. Mamoon Habib, who is professor in the School of Business and Entrepreneurship at Independent University in Bangladesh, and also visiting scientist at the University of Texas in Arlington, or UTA, in the US. So welcome, everybody. Thanks very much for making time today and for being our panel of experts. Now, a good starting point for today's discussion about creating a stronger and more transparent supply chain is an article from Supply Chain Dive, quite a useful publication, that talks about mapping your supply chain to create resilience. And obviously creating resilience and understanding your supply chain is very important in these unpredictable times. Logically, resilience is better than constantly reacting to shocks, it seems to me, but perhaps we can talk about that. And the article suggests that many companies have had less control over their supply chains than they thought previously, and so need to shift focus to being proactive rather than reactive. First, some initial reactions to the article. You can find the link to it, everyone watching, on the site there. Louis, you up first of all. Did you have any first thoughts about the article?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you much for having me today, and looking forward to the discussion with you guys. So the first thing that sort of came to mind for me when I read the article was a board presentation that I held. It's about 12 months ago now, maybe a bit more, when we had a lot of supply chain delays, and especially when there was a huge backlog outside LA Long Beach. So at some point, like 90 vessels anchored outside of the port. And I presented as part of my presentation to the board to say, look, got to watch this scenario, what's going on here. And everybody went, well, we ship from Korea to the UK or to Australia. How does that impact us? And then I went through the whole list of sort of reasons why it does impact us, and make it clear that a supply chain is not really a chain anymore. It's a micro environment. It's a network. And just give a bit of context, the boats anchored there meant sailings were blanked to the UK because boats were needed to the US West Coast and the East Coast. The rates were extremely high because the demand was so high. That means sailings got blanked just because the shipping lines wanted more profit on the lines, on the boats. And also at some point it came to discussion, and I think it was the Lodestar who had an article about it, that the shipping lines to avoid the West Coast were considering shipping container vessels through Europe and then on to the US East Coast. So again, takes a lot of capacity off what would be then our lane. So when I read the article about the secondary risk, and that really hit home there, because it was just one example, but I think you'll see that everywhere, that nowadays you just don't know where your secondary risk come from, because usually it's a network of I don't know, 10 tiers sometimes even to get through your real supply chain. And the visibility often stops after tier 1. So you've got your suppliers, you know where they are, you know what they do, and after that you don't know who your suppliers are. So for example, us in Korea, we know where the second tier is, but after that it becomes invisible. And for some other ones as well, they know where they get the product from, but then the second tier might be in China, the second tier might be in Africa, and they don't know. So you don't always know what secondary risk is within your supply chain.
That's right. Last week, we in the previous session, we talked a bit about the reasons for the hold up in LA, and the threat of sort of legal of strike action and so on, and about people switching to the East Coast. The piece makes several suggestions, and as you suggest, Louis, that supply chain should be more prepared for secondary risks. I suppose intuitively, those might include war and pandemics, which obviously most people would think of as primary risks to life and limb. But to supply chain managers, it's not about the prime source of supply chain disruption. So, Nijoy, did you have any thoughts about this as well?
Yeah, definitely, Chris. And thank you all again for having me on here. I would say like one thing that actually stood out to me as I was going through the article is, while it raises the idea of like having to understand this threat proactively so you can plan ahead and actually get prepared for it. If you really think about what happened, or what took us through the pandemic more specifically, you could not have actually predicted that up ahead and have taken like proactive steps. It was a matter of months, a few weeks, and things started changing very drastically, and the impact was quite felt in many parts of the world. So I think there's more of a need around more imminent feedback loops kind of like playing a role here, wherein you are able to, very quickly identify those threats, plan around how you can mitigate this in a very short term, and then also be able to like execute against this planning as well, which I think is like a lot more critical in addition to like the proactiveness that you can plan. So that's one thing I felt beyond the years of like the struggles that we faced, where proactiveness may have helped. Here were the situations where the quick reactions that we can bring forth really made a lot of difference.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. And we can come back to one of those points a little bit later when we get on to our main discussion points. So thank you very much. So Karim, one of the other issues the article says, it talks about a lack of cyber mapping and also a lack of visibility, which we touched on already. I'm sorry, Camille. Forgive me. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Hi all. First of all, thank you for having me as well. So mapping is one of the essential part of the supply chain management, as we all know. So mapping all the processes, and even right now, due to cybersecurity issues, even for the financial system as well, need to be mapped out as well. So I'm actually in the more involved in the more side of the mapping out the processes and the operations with the external suppliers. And I agree with Louis, is like, this is not about a supply chain only. This is an ecosystem itself, and we have so many unpredicted issues or problems all around the world. And one of the most important thing is supply chain resilience. So with said, absolutely, map out the processes, and knowing your processes, being transparent and visible on your processes is literally a big plus, and you actually start a game ahead. But also the other thing is In the meantime, that you need to team up with your partners, your all supply chain partners and other stakeholders to make it working. So that's the key thing for overall mapping side. It's not about just mapping the processes or understanding the geographically where your supplier is or how do they supply or what is actually the payment methods or financial systems they're using. It's all about okay, what is your mitigation or what is your actually the counter actions actually to enact these processes.
Fantastic. Roman Butler just saying on the chat there that he loves the phrasing of that supply chains are an ecosystem. He's never thought of it like that. So thanks for that, Roman. If anyone has any questions, please add them to the chat and I will come to them as soon as I'm able to. Professor, did you have any sort of initial thoughts about the article? I'm sure you did, being in the world of academia, sitting slightly outside of this, observing supply chains, the mistakes people make, but also the things they get right. So what were your reactions to the article? Professor, can you hear me? Professor, if you can hear me, I think you may be muted. Could you switch on your mic? Okay, I think perhaps we need to come back to the professor. Sorry, we can't hear you, Professor. We will get our technical team to find out why we can't hear you, or perhaps you can't hear us. So I'm going to move on. Forgive us, Professor, if you're still talking. The main question points, he's gone, hopefully we'll be coming back. The main question points, firstly, visibility and transparency tools, how to ensure your organization is keeping pace with supply chain macro developments. That's obviously quite a big topic. The focus on macro, which I take to mean overall visibility, is interesting because it isn't the devil in the details. But Louis Goldman, your award-winning technology company, hair technology company, was set up as recently as 2007, but already has presences in Australia, Finland, and France. So it's fair to say that Cloud9 has been expanding fast while building supply chains, perhaps from scratch, and taking them across the globe. So has building what I take to be a brand new network of suppliers in the age of cloud tools been an advantage to you in terms of creating this transparency and visibility rather than having a legacy estate, or has it actually been harder in some ways?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it is obviously quite interesting to see when you expand into different territories, you do often work with different systems. So some are more of the physical nature. So we actually migrated last year to a new ERP because we ended up
Can you hear me?
having seven different systems to do the accounting and the stock purchasing and the stock accountability across the different territories. So complete separate system in our Australian supply chain and financing compared to our UK and European operation. So when we migrated, we got rid of probably thousands of spreadsheets, as well as 7 systems. So to your point, legacy systems were still in place, and we managed to sort of kill off 7 of them and have them all in a very nice new cloud-based system that we can access from anywhere. And I can have apps on my phone and can see stock levels before I go to bed, first thing in the morning, whatever I want on a packet of cereal and stuff. So it certainly helps because the data and the visibility is there instantly for you. You don't have to run big reports. You don't have to go into 2 or 3 different systems. And the time I'm saving, I can spend more on analyzing the data and gaining that visibility further.
Okay, thanks for that, Louis. Can you hear us now, Professor? We can hear you, I think. No? Okay. Okay, so Nijoy, Deloitte is a multinational services company that both advises others with consultancy, auditing services, and so on. But it must also have a supply chain of its own, a largely digital one, I imagine. So how is Deloitte helping its own clients in terms of finding visibility and transparency, and the tools they need. What are they? And does Deloitte, to use a popular phrase, eat its own dog food, to use a common parlance, or perhaps drink its own champagne? I think that was a phrase used at Davos. So how is Deloitte helping its clients, and how is it also solving its own problems or challenges?
That's a great question, Chris. So there are many ways, considering we're like located in so many different parts of the world. There are many ways we're going about in helping clients in navigating through this space where the technology disruption is happening at such a fast pace that a lot of times clients are finding it a challenge to kind of understand which are the tools or the solutions out there that will really help them. And so on one side of things, while we're kind of developing our perspectives for the clients on what type of solutions would be really beneficial for their specific situations. We are alongside of that as a technology company also developing our own set of tools that can enhance this visibility. We had recently launched out a solution called Greenlight, which was more in the sustainability space, where the objective has been to how can we like provide visibility beyond just the tier 1 suppliers and looking beyond into your entire scope 3 of emissions, and understand, how does each of the component of each of your suppliers kind of play a critical role, and how we as a connected mass will need to kind of come together to address this issue. So that's one of the multitude of solutions that we are actually focused on in developing. Other one that I want to put a quick spotlight on is the digital twin of organizations. So digital twin, as you'd understand, it has the physical side of things, but it's essentially replicating that into a digital context, and you do so this with like many different tools. So you have telematics, you have IoT, you have multitude of these devices kind of all coming into play a role, so that, and again, goes back to my point earlier, that this will enable that quick response that you can get by collecting data from your entire operations on an ongoing basis, and thereby, it enhances the visibility. If you talk about trucks going from one place to another, the temperature that is being stored for the different products that are being taken, the time that it's taking for them to like ship goods from point A to point B, and all the multitude of factors that are coming into play there. So there are these different sensors and tools out there individually that can collect all this information, but in the context of a digital twin for an organization, it all kind of comes to play together, that now you can convert all that data into like meaningful insights, and you're able to now take quick reactions. So you're now on one side of things shedding light into places that you've never had access to in terms of the visibility that you have there. But on the second hand, now you're able to do things a lot more faster with the information that is being given as well.
I notice that AI is increasingly becoming a part of the solutions that Deloitte itself offers and perhaps uses, and I'm sure that's the case in a lot of industries now. All the conversations about ChatGPT and generative tools and so on. How does AI help in this process? It's only as good as the data you put in, isn't that right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think on one side of things, AI can as simply be like automation, right? Where we are looking to just merely automate manual processes, thereby also removing a lot of the errors that can take place in a manual process. But what it's also doing is that it's taking away time that can be dedicated into a lot more of the more strategic efforts, or like you're almost like strong arming yourself with these digital tools or the automation that's available through different types of AIs. There's like natural language processing that you have computer vision that is able to track images and pictures and translate that into meaningful data. So you're trying to like kind of shift the course of like the multitude of time that has been spent, and now you're able to kind of dedicate that to places where you've not been able to like be very say very active, or like be able to like quickly react to things. So it gives us a lot of time to now focus on things that we've not really focused on previously, by taking away a lot of that manual effort that was taking away time from a lot of resources previously.
Okay. By the way, to anyone watching, we're trying to get the professor back to talk to us. We've got a nice backlog of questions for him, but for some reason he couldn't hear us and we couldn't hear him. So we're trying to fix that. Camille, Avrim, Amitech is a very different operation to, say, Cloud9, which has only been around for about 15 years. Your company was founded in the 1930s, I think I'm right in saying, so just after the Great Depression. You built a global physical supply chain in the world of shipping, and I'm sure soon after that, air freight and so on. But your own role is in about operational excellence today. So what has changed? And you're dealing with a lot of cloud-based tools today, I'm sure. And how do they help in terms of getting greater transparency and visibility over what must be a very long-established supply chain in your business?
So we, Amitech, collides a lot of small operations, because Amitech actually focus on more niche markets, and my division is one of them. And we try to actually provide the outstanding solutions for our clients, but generally we prefer there to be not so many players in that area. So highly specific or like specialized organization. So for us, we actually started switching back to more automation on the sales side and marketing side as well. So Salesforce is one of our critical partners for the entire Amitech operations, and we collect a lot of data and customer feedback from there. And this also supports us more redesign or create new products for the market as well. So, when you're in the niche, then niche market, it can be easily tracked. That actually forces you to develop new products and then change the game continuously. So that side is we are a lot busier than operations. But for the supply chain side, still we use the similar tools for our especially supplier assessments, audits, and performance tracking as well, rather than the orthodox methods known for years and years. But for us, actually, as Nijoy said, for the operational and supply chain side, because we are in the niche market and we are a lot of customization for all our customers in every industry. So we're actually working with 14 different industries worldwide. So we're focused on more reproducibility and consistency in our supply chain, because we have no chance or no option to offer our suppliers or partners or stakeholders to give them dedicated, forecasts or, firm orders or plan or strategic, initiatives telling them up to 5 years, this is where we are going. So in the industries we're working on, we have a lot of ambiguities. So to be able to turn this an opportunity that for the operations side, that we're focused on more the supply chain consistency, and the sales side, we try to collect more feedback as much as from our customers. And we're actually dealing with hundreds of thousand entries daily among all businesses. So to process that, definitely, the old school method's not working anymore. So that's why we started working with other partners as well.
Roman Buckler, thank you for your contributions. Roman has said that he agrees with you, but it's almost naive, he thinks, to think we can all work together cohesively without one member or link believing that they're more in control. I perhaps very quickly thoughts on that. Camille, first, I'm sure, so he pitched that at you. Just maybe 30 seconds on this point before we move on.
So his question is like, he's in agreement, Roman Butler?
He's saying that he thinks it's naive to think we can all work together cohesively without one member or link in the supply chain being more in control than the others. Any thoughts on that? Or?
I mean, so it's all about like, so if you think about like the human psychology, yeah, I mean, it's arguable statement, like if it's being naive for stuff, but for the survival mode, actually, there is no other option for us. Like we don't follow the old rhetorics like the supplier-customer relationship in our supplier management. This is all about partnership because, as I said, like I mean, we have a lot of unknowns in our businesses, but customer requirements or customer expectations are they remain same. So there is not any option like working together collaboratively.
Okay. He also raised the point, which I'll very quickly deal with because we need to move on because of time. He asked about AI, redundancies, and so on. That old idea that AI, robotics, and all these technologies are going to make mass redundancies. I was talking to somebody yesterday who's the CEO of a robotics and AI company, and he said that it's about filling the 11 million unfilled jobs, and that's just in the US alone, rather than taking jobs away from human beings. So that's something to think about. Right, let's move on. 3 years of pandemic. We've obviously have pushed people towards digital solutions and workflows. We've had a fragile economy, inflation, the failure of some banks, of course, just this week, reminding us of the 2008 and 09 crisis, war in Ukraine, Russian sanctions, Brexit, tense relations with China. So I guess the point is that how can we really use AI tools or any other supply chain tools to give us insights into these massive issues? Because they're all secondary issues in terms of our supply chains, unless suppliers have gone out of business or can't physically ship. But these are massive global problems that are impacting businesses. Perhaps it's a good point to bring in Louis. We haven't heard from you for a while. Apologies for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's obviously a lot of point there being sort of more technology focused and forward thinking of what new tools can I bring in to create visibility, what can AI do to help with that. But I think go back to your point of secondary risks and sort of just entire supply chain management. I think people are too quick to jump onto new stuff, forgetting the basics, forgetting the foundation. And one of the real basics, which I found really, really helpful for us, is collaboration with your suppliers. Like Camille said earlier, that traditional supplier customer supplier relationship just doesn't work in a network or an ecosystem of a supply chain. You've got to build strategic partner. Yes, there's elements where it still works. Your printer and your paper for the printer and stuff, you can probably have a more customer supplier relationship versus your key core products that your business relies on a day-to-day basis. You've got to be more invested with them. So one thing that along those lines, what we've done is we worked when it was the pandemic and the supply chain being just busted everywhere because everybody jumped on the e-commerce boom, etc. We worked with our supplier, our main supplier for our main electrical items, really closely and to understand how can we sort of help them to provide us a service. And we literally said, look, this is what we need. How can we help you enable that? And one thing we found out is that a lot of the internal components, which takes the longest in our products to source, to ship, to manufacture, etc., was actually quite modular, so quite across the range. So what we've then decided, instead of just us providing a forecast per individual SKU, we rolled them up to what we call the series. So for example, if it's going to Australia or going to Europe or going to the UK, same product, but you just change the plug. The plug wasn't the problem. The internal components was the problem. So what we've done is we forecast, okay, we need 6,000 of these units, and we forecasted that a year out. And then when it came closer to production lead time, we then said, okay, of these 6,000, we want 2,000 to the UK, 2,000 to Europe, 2,000 to Australia. And that helped them a lot, sort of reducing that critical path delay, because they could source in the 6,000 internal components, which took the longest, and then just ordered some plugs right at the end when they needed what we need to place. And again, that's not AI. That was a couple of people doing it, but it was just a real fundamental business principle of collaboration that really worked for us.
Thanks for that. We've bridged sort of invisibly onto our next discussion topic, which I should have flagged up for you, and that's improving long-term planning, developing scenarios that affect your relationships with suppliers and customers. So we've already been talking about that for a while. I came across a useful survey this week, which I'm apologies for springing this on you, and that's from PwC. An 83% of 305 executives surveyed by the consulting company say their supply chain technology investments have not fully delivered the results they expected. And technologies include the IoT, which we've touched on a bit, cloud platforms again. PwC said it believes the fault is not with the technologies, but with the lack of effective planning on behalf of the user. And the report said technology initiatives typically do not have a well-articulated value delivery plan, and therefore struggle to meet expectations. And so the go live of the technology itself is the sole marker of success rather than the business value. So Nijoy Robinson, firstly, apologies for springing a competitor's report on you, but does that chime with Deloitte's own experiences? How can companies such as yourselves, most importantly, help clients avoid exactly that type of supply chain issue?
Yep, Chris, I personally tend to say that I agree with that sentiment, mainly because, as I said, the amount of technology solutions that are springing out on a daily basis is multitude, and so a lot of the times our clients approach us with asking us for hey, we're trying to do an assessment of the different technology solutions out there. How do we go about it? So if for clients who actually take that effort to understand what their actual problem is, and then try to see what's a good fit for purpose solution out there in the market, I think there's almost like a 40 to 50% of success that you'd be able to achieve just by doing a lot more assessment. Now, that is just a step one in the whole process, because from there onwards, the whole element of customizing the solution so that it really, you could get the benefit out of it to its most, that's where I felt like a lot of times it gets a bit detrimental, because as a standalone solution, it sounds really good. It solves multitude of problems. Everything that can be taken care of is taken care of. But when it really comes to okay, how does this work for a grocery chain? How does this work for mineral iron ore company? It's very different based on the fact that they have different operations. So and on the face of it, some of these solutions would kind of promise to solve everything out there in the world, but when you really dive into can it really specifically fix for this problem for a client, that's when we start noticing there's a lot of gaps and a lot of rifts from what has been told to what can be done. So, that I feel like there's a lot more effort that needs to be played there again to see how does it custom specifically address the client's problems. Now, beyond this, then comes the whole aspect of change management, wherein you kind of then go to understand we've been doing things like this for the past 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. Now, you have a technology that's disrupting the way you've been working. You got to kind of understand what's your new ways of working, right? It's almost like, and I would want to also disagree with that point that was made earlier, that jobs it's a threat to us, and I don't personally agree to it. I think that it's more of tools at this point of time, but that by itself can't do much. But if it's in the right hands, it gives you so much leverage to put your time into things that you've not really planned for previously, right? So the solution is good, but as long as you've done taken the necessary measures to see if it's a good specific solution for your problems, and you've also done the effort to now say, how am I going to adopt this technology, and then how am I going to still achieve my goals for the next 5-10 years, that's where you've been able to like find success. A lot of times that's where we've seen clients end up taking like 5-year implementation exercises on like different technology platforms and not truly find success at all.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Nijoy. Camille Ivreem, scenario planning, is that the answer really? How far ahead can you really predict so many problems, and particularly we've had so many secondary problems as we've seen? I imagine that Amitech has nearly a century of data to refer to and has seen every kind of disruption during that time. But disruptions when they come along are still a surprise, I imagine.
No, I mean, we were suffered as same as well. So it depends on, of course, like divisions. Some division actually deal with a lot of semiconductors. They almost like closed out and their operations. And our division, we were lucky because of like switching more to oil and gas consumption in the last decade. So yeah, I mean, depends on the division. We were suffered, or that actually turned out our advantage based on our like product portfolios.
Okay, cool. Louis, for a company that, unlike Amitech, has only been in business for about 15 years, albeit in 15 years that's included recession, pandemic, Brexit, war in Europe, climate change, it's been a very packed, short period of time. How much insight can you get from your data that you've gathered since 2007? And what have you learned very quickly from all of these global disruptions happening so quickly?
I mean, the first lesson we learned is you just don't know what's around the corner. So yeah, I agree. Scenario planning is great, but to Nijo's earlier point of you've got to be reactive as well. And everyone talking about proactiveness, but you actually got to be reactive, and you've got to have a pretty solid process in place for your day-to-day to be able to spend your time and focus on being reactive. So to the first part of your question, yes, we gain a lot of data, but like you said, it's data that is depending on the scenario you're in. Like, yes, we learned a lot when containers run out in China, when there is delays, when there is no. So we now, when we do a supply chain risk analysis and when we look at our potential sort of plan B, plan C, we know what's coming. So if another pandemic hits, I know what to do. But it's really difficult to sort of use that efficiently to plan what's around the corner, because in a way it's all about forecasting. You're trying to predict something in the future based on something that happens in the past, and it's really rarely is the same.
Let's move on to our final discussion point and stick with you for a moment, Louis, because we sort of bridged onto that naturally, about building trust and communication to strengthen your network. In the digital world, as we've seen, supply chains run both upstream and downstream with often complex multi-way relationships between companies, suppliers and customers. Louis, you've had the luxury perhaps of building those supplier and logistics relationships from scratch. Has that actually been a challenge? Are you finding out who you can trust from a standing start, in effect? And is that more difficult?
Yeah, it's always building blocks to build trust and communication, because everybody, even great partners, everybody still has their own agenda. And especially in the network of suppliers, obviously we have our main suppliers for our main electrical items, but we do also source a lot of accessories from different suppliers, like China and other countries. And everybody's got their own agenda, so you've got to go in with a level of distrust, unfortunately, because otherwise you might end up being on the wrong side of the supplier or the relationship. But you do build that over time, and it's really, and data certainly helps there, because you can then underpin discussion points and agreements with the data, and you can then prove, look, the data supports your argument or the data doesn't support your argument. So again, goes back to what we've kind of been saying about visibility, having this visibility that then builds the trust, that knowing what the other person is saying is also correct or incorrect. It depends obviously how it falls. Just to pick up one point there, it's the question mentions network, and you rightly said the supply chain network. I think you also got to build that trust and communication internally, like between a sales department and a supply chain department. Can you trust one of the first questions? Can you trust the forecast you've been given in terms of sales? And that's one thing we worked quite well on over the last couple of years recently since I joined Cloud9, that we're really building a trust and relationship between both these departments internally. And I'm glad to say I trust the sales forecast now. The very first one I got, I probably didn't trust, because they didn't trust our forecasting. So they put a buffer on, and we put a bit of a buffer on, and we ended up with too much stock. So we really worked on building that internal trust as well.
Okay, Nijoy, I'm sure in a lot of cases your response is perhaps employ Deloitte, and that's an excellent solution, I'm sure, for lots of people. But how can a services company such as yourselves help its own customers build trust and relationships with their suppliers and partners? How can you get involved in that process and help establish those relationships?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I feel like we could be doing, and we are actually doing this for a lot of clients, is around highlighting what is the outcomes of the trust and communications that they can build, right? To the point of, like, when we are called in for an exercise to say what technology solutions you think out there that would be good fit for us, while on one side of things, we're pointing towards the type of technology. So let's take, for example, blockchain. Blockchain has been gaining notorious, a spotlight these days, mainly because of the idea that you can still preserve your data, your IP, and still pass this across your supply network beyond even the tier 1s and the tier 2s, right? So it gives a lot of promise. But at the end of the day, like, it really boils down to, like, do your suppliers trust you? Do you have that same trust back with them to make this a success, right? So there is an element of, like, there is success that you can find with technologies, but, like, if you really want to, like, make sure that you're finding that success using that technology, everyone who's going to be a part of that technology would also have to come on board. And you can do this with, like, strong collaboration. So this is where, like, they're going back to your earlier point, Chris, is that, like, are they finding true success with, like, with all of this technology that exists out there? Probably not, because you still need to, like, not forget that there is a human element that is involved in participating with this technology, and then, making sure you're being very collaborative. So, as part of our jobs, we are not, like, very myopic about, like, your need is this, we'll recommend you what you should be doing. But we'll also say, if you have to make this a success, these are the different criteria that you have to almost, like, check off to say that, okay, you found success with the technology that you're using. And I feel like the human component, to what Louis mentioned about, like, the internal trust you got to build, really critical when it comes to finding success with the technology implementation. Same goes with your suppliers and everyone who wants to get on board with the technology that you're trying to implement, maybe, like, even the purchasing system that you're publishing, right? So all of that, I feel like you could find success as long as your whole network, internal, external, is coming together and agreeing that, okay, this is beneficial for us.
Wonderful. That's a useful sort of series of think points. So thanks so much for that, Nijoy. Camille, Evrim, what would be your sort of checklist of the major lessons that you've learned over the past few years in terms of building trust, managing upstream and downstream communications, and building more resilient supply chains? So what would be your top 3 lessons in our last couple of minutes that we have?
So first of all, like, whatever happens, like pandemics, wars, all the stuff, like, you owe your customers. So our existence actually, just for our customers. So every component's lead time changed. Every component's, like, the source changed, and everything. So, but unfortunately, we are not in a luxury that saying our customers, for example, giving, like, instead of 7 weeks lead time, in the past we can't tell them right now 45 weeks. So to be able to do that, we strategize 2 things. One is in-region fabrication. So we are opening actually like the remote locations near our customer facilities. So we are like enacted 2 locations, like deployed 2 locations in the Middle East and Asia, because where our oil and refinery, that market actually is strong. So we are just building carbon copy plants over there, and that's all supply chain setup is different. But they are close to actually the resources and raw materials and everything. So in-region fabrication is one of our strategy to reduce the lead time and serve our customers properly. The other thing is, again, as I stated before, is so there is no perfect forecast, or there is no, nobody is fortune teller in supply chain world. Engineering support is another thing. So we actually like bolstering our teams, especially like supply chain groups with more engineering background, to support our suppliers to be able to benefit for different minerals, different metals, different manufacturing techniques to support our client needs to reduce the lead time. So actually we are reteaching them to utilize different materials or making different components as well, to be able to more consistency in their operations. So this is two other things actually we learned. And lastly is like, are we still prepared on the stuff? So, it was a maybe it's arguable. To me, it was actually a wrong fashion in the last 30 years, globalization, and then, like outsourcing everything to low-cost regions and try to collect all the components and just making a few assembly or, a few like screws actually in the Western countries, and try to actually offer this cheaper solution to our customers. So this is not working. So more local actually material, more local ingredients, and serve the market properly needs to be a solution, because we also actually started like getting hurt by financials as well. Working capital is the critical thing for our business management, and even when you get something cheaper in US market or in somewhere else in Asia rather than so your cost of inventory, your cost of actually like keeping the long lead time and other stuff, market is not waiting for you. So you need to be more rapid solutions and a dedicated supply chain where you operate this. So that's these 3 things actually like our top 3 strategic, initiatives.
That's
within Emetech.
okay. I think we're out of time, so many apologies for that. I suppose we should say to Louis, congratulations for building a business through so many difficult challenges in such a short space of time, and so that people can still have great hair. So I think that's an inspiration for everyone. Thank you for that. Now, next week, please join me on the 22nd, next Wednesday, for a look at how harnessing transformative technology in your supply chain can be a help. So thanks very much. I've been Chris Middleton, and hopefully next time we'll be able to get Professor Habib back. Have a good day.